I was 31 years old, living in Denver, and I'd just realized that the man I'd sacrificed everything for thought sharing his victory lap with his mistress was a reasonable request. We'd been married for 7 years. Together for 9. I'd met Daniel when he was a pre-med student with big dreams and empty pockets, working part-time at a campus bookstore while struggling to pay tuition. I'd been a program coordinator at a nonprofit making decent money with a grandmother who'd left me $43,000 when she passed. Money I'd been saving for graduate school, for a down payment on a house, for a future I thought we'd build together. Instead, I'd written check after check to pay his tuition bills while he promised it was temporary. While he swore he'd support me through my master's program once he was established. While he looked at me with those earnest eyes and said, "We're a team, Maya. Your sacrifice is our investment." I believed him. I'd worked as a program coordinator during the day and waited tables 4 nights a week to cover our rent, our groceries, our life. Daniel studied. That was his job, he said. Becoming a doctor required focus. I understood. I was proud of him. I wore my exhaustion like a badge of honor, proof that I was the kind of partner who showed up when it mattered. His graduation was supposed to be our finish line. The moment when all those years of struggle transformed into success we could finally share. I'd planned the dinner 3 months in advance. Reserved a private room at the restaurant where we'd had our first date. Invited his parents, his sister, our closest friends. Ordered his favorite wine. Even bought a new dress, deep green silk, the first piece of clothing I'd purchased for myself in 2 years that wasn't from a clearance rack. I'd arrived early to make sure everything was perfect. Table looked beautiful. Candles, white roses, a small wrapped gift I'd saved for months to afford. A vintage stethoscope I'd found at an estate sale, engraved with his initials. Daniel was supposed to meet me at 6. By 6:15 I was checking my phone. By 6:30 I was calling him. By 6:45 our guests were arriving and I was making excuses about traffic, about him running late from a last-minute meeting with his residency program director. He walked in at 7:10. With her. I recognized her immediately. Simone. The study partner he'd mentioned casually over the past 2 years. The one who was just a friend. The one who'd helped him prepare for his boards. The one whose name had started appearing in his conversations more frequently than mine. She was beautiful in that effortless way some women are, tall, confident, wearing a black dress that probably cost more than my monthly grocery budget. She had her hand on Daniel's arm. Familiar. Comfortable. Possessive. Everyone at the table went quiet. Daniel looked around at the stunned faces and laughed. Actually laughed like we were all overreacting to something perfectly normal. "Sorry we're late," he said brightly. Simone and I were celebrating at her place and lost track of time. He guided her toward the empty chairs, the 2 I'd left beside me, thinking his parents might want to sit close to their son on his big night. I stood there, frozen, while my mind tried to process what was happening. "Daniel," I said quietly. "What is this?" He looked at me with something like confusion, like my question didn't make sense. "What do you mean?" "It's my graduation dinner. Simone helped me get through school. I wanted her here." "You wanted," I couldn't finish the sentence. Around us, his parents were exchanging glances. Our friends were staring at their plates. The silence was suffocating. Simone smiled at me. Not cruel exactly. Just entitled. Like she had every right to be there. "I hope you don't mind, Maya," she said, her voice honey-sweet. "Daniel insisted I come. He said this night wouldn't be complete without me." I looked at my husband. The man I'd given up everything for. The man whose dreams I'd funded with my inheritance and my sleep and my youth. "This is our celebration," I said, and my voice sounded strange even to me. Distant. "I planned this for us. For you and me and the people who've supported you. And Simone supported me," Daniel said, like it was obvious. "Come on, Maya. Don't be jealous. I just want to spend this evening with both of you. Is that really so much to ask? After everything we've all been through? Both of you. Like we were interchangeable. Like the woman who'd paid for his education and the woman he'd been sleeping with, because I knew now with absolute certainty that they were sleeping together, were just two members of his support team, equally deserving of his gratitude. Sit down, he said gently, gesturing to the chair beside Simone. Let's have a nice dinner. You've worked so hard on this. Don't ruin it by making a scene. Something inside me went very, very still. I looked around the table. At his parents who wouldn't meet my eyes. At his sister who looked embarrassed. At our friends who seemed desperate to be anywhere else. The beautiful room I'd reserved, the flowers I'd chosen, the gift wrapped in silver paper sitting by my purse. I picked up my bag. Maya, what are you doing? Daniel asked. I'm leaving, I said. Don't be dramatic. Just sit down and enjoy your evening, I said. Both of you. I walked out of that restaurant and didn't look back. Didn't cry, didn't run, didn't give anyone the satisfaction of seeing me break. I got in my car, drove home to our apartment, and started making phone calls. Not to friends. Not to family. To a divorce attorney I'd looked up 3 months earlier, when Daniel had first mentioned that Simone was going through a hard time and needed him to be available for emotional support. I'd hoped I was being paranoid. I wasn't. The attorney's name was Robert Chen, and he answered on the third ring despite it being past 8 on a Friday evening. I'd found his name through a colleague at work who'd gone through a brutal divorce 2 years earlier. She'd told me, if you ever need someone who doesn't mess around, call Robert. He's expensive, but he's worth every cent. I hadn't thought I'd ever need to make that call. Miss Patel, he said. I wasn't expecting to hear from you tonight. I'd contacted his office 3 months ago for a consultation I told myself was just in case. Just to know my options. Just to feel less powerless when Daniel came home smelling like someone else's perfume and told me I was imagining things. I need to move forward, I said. My voice sounded remarkably steady. As quickly as possible. What happened? I told him. All of it. The graduation dinner. Simone. Casual way Daniel had asked me not to be jealous, like I was a child having a tantrum over sharing a toy. Robert was quiet for a moment. Then he said, Do you have access to your financial records? Bank statements, tax returns, any documentation of money you've contributed to his education? Yes. I kept everything. Good. Don't tell him you're filing. Don't give him any warning at all. Monday morning first thing, I'm going to need you in my office with every document you have. We're going to move fast on this. How fast? Fast enough that he won't know what hit him until the papers are in his hand. I spent the weekend in methodical silence. Daniel came home around midnight Friday, stumbling and cheerful, smelling like wine and Simone's perfume. He found me in the living room, still dressed, sitting in the dark. Hey, he said, slurring slightly. You left so early. We missed you. Did you? Don't be like that, Maya. You're making this into something it's not. Simone and I are friends. That's it. I thought you'd be mature enough to handle having her there. I looked at him. Really looked at him. And saw a stranger wearing my husband's face. Where did you go after dinner? I asked. Back to her place. Had a few more drinks. Celebrated properly. He kicked off his shoes. You would have had fun if you'd stayed. Everyone was asking about you. I'm sure they were. He frowned like he was finally sensing that something was different. Are you mad at me? No, I said honestly. I'm not mad. I was done. But I didn't tell him that. He went to bed. I stayed up until dawn organizing files. Bank statements showing every tuition payment I'd made. Receipts from the part-time jobs I'd worked. Email exchanges where he'd promised to support my education once things settled down. tax returns showing my income versus his lack thereof for 5 consecutive years. I had 7 years of evidence that I'd built his life while he'd built a relationship with someone else. Monday morning, I called in sick to work. Met Robert at his office at 8 a.m. with 2 accordion folders full of documentation. He reviewed everything with the focused intensity of a surgeon examining an X-ray. "This is airtight," he said. "Colorado is an equitable distribution state, but given the circumstances, the financial contribution imbalance, the potential adultery, the fact that you sacrificed career advancement for his education, we can make a strong case that you're entitled to significant compensation." "I don't want his money," I said. Robert looked up. "Then what do you want?" "I want my inheritance back. The $43,000 I spent on his education. I want reimbursement for the lost wages from the career advancement I postponed. And I want him to understand that he doesn't get to have both of us. The first 2 I can absolutely get you. The third," Robert smiled slightly, "the third will happen naturally when he realizes what he's losing." Papers were filed Tuesday afternoon. Per Colorado law, Daniel had to be served in person. Robert arranged for the process server to deliver them Thursday morning, at the hospital where Daniel had just started his residency. I wasn't there to see it, but I heard about it later from Daniel's sister, who called me in tears. Apparently, he'd been having coffee in the physician's lounge when the server approached. In front of his attending physician, 2 fellow residents, and a nurse he'd been trying to impress. The server handed him the envelope and said, loud enough for everyone to hear, "Daniel Sharma? You've been served. Divorce petition from Maya Patel." His sister said he'd turned white. Just stood there holding the papers while everyone stared. Then he'd called me 17 times in 20 minutes. I let every call go to voicemail. By Thursday afternoon, he was at our apartment. I'd changed the locks that morning, something Robert had advised since my name was the only one on the lease. Daniel had moved in 3 years ago but had never bothered to add himself officially. Another thing he'd been meaning to do eventually. He pounded on the door. "Maya, open up. We need to talk about this." I stood on the other side, listening to him beg, and felt absolutely nothing. "This is insane," he shouted. "You can't just end our marriage because I invited a friend to dinner. You're overreacting." I opened the door. He looked terrible. Still in his scrubs, hair disheveled, eyes wild with panic. Behind him, I could see Simone sitting in his car at the curb. Watching. Waiting. "I'm not overreacting," I said calmly. "I'm correcting a mistake I made 7 years ago when I confused sacrifice with love. Maya, please. Just talk to me. We can work this out. Read the petition, Daniel. Everything you need to know is in there. I don't understand. We're married. We made vows. You can't just throw that away because you brought your girlfriend to the celebration dinner I planned for your graduation?" Kept my voice level. "The graduation I paid for? The achievement I made possible by working 2 jobs while you studied? She's not my girlfriend. Daniel." I looked past him to Simone, who was watching us with barely concealed anxiety. "She's sitting in your car right now. You went home with her Friday night. You've been sleeping with her for at least 6 months, probably longer." His face confirmed everything. "It's not like that," he said weakly. "It doesn't matter what it's like. Read the petition. You'll see I'm asking for reimbursement of the $43,000 I spent on your education, plus compensation for the career advancement I sacrificed to support you. My attorney has documentation of everything." $43,000? "Maya, I don't have that kind of money." "Then you should have thought about that before you decided our marriage could accommodate a third person. I never said I wanted a divorce. You're the one giving up." I looked at him, really looked at him, and saw what I'd been refusing to see for years. The entitlement. The assumption that I would always be there, always waiting, always sacrificing while he took everything I gave and asked for more. I gave up 7 years of my life for you, I said quietly. I gave up my education, my career growth, my grandmother's inheritance. I gave up nights and weekends and any semblance of a life outside of supporting your dreams. And you celebrated the achievement I made possible by bringing another woman to our table and asking me not to be jealous. Maya, I'm not giving up, Daniel. I'm getting out. There's a difference. I closed the door. He called me every day for 2 weeks. Left voicemails that cycled through anger, bargaining, and something that sounded like grief. His parents called. His sister called. Even Simone called once, a rambling message about how sorry she was, how she'd never meant for this to happen, how Daniel had told her I was okay with it. I blocked all of them. Robert moved through the legal process with ruthless efficiency. Discovery revealed what I'd suspected. Daniel had been having an affair with Simone for 8 months. Text messages, hotel receipts, evidence so clear-cut that his attorney advised him not to fight. The settlement came back in my favor. $43,000 for the tuition I'd paid. Another $35,000 in compensation for lost career advancement, calculated based on the salary difference between my current position and where I'd likely be if I'd completed my master's degree on schedule. The apartment remained mine. He got his car and his medical degree. The divorce was finalized in March, 4 months after I'd walked out of that restaurant. Daniel tried one last time to talk to me at the final hearing. Caught me in the courthouse hallway while our attorneys were filing paperwork. Was it worth it? He asked. Throwing away 7 years over one mistake? I looked at him and felt that same strange absence of feeling. I didn't throw away 7 years, I said. I invested them in someone who wasn't worth the investment. I'm just correcting my portfolio. That's cold, Maya. No, I said. That's honest. You wanted to spend your graduation evening with both of us. Now you can spend the rest of your life with just her. Congratulations on getting exactly what you asked for. The settlement money hit my account in April. $78,000. Not enough to buy back 7 years, but enough to finally finish what I'd started. I enrolled in a master's program in nonprofit management that summer. Used part of the settlement for tuition and part for a down payment on a small condo in a neighborhood I'd always loved but couldn't afford when I was funding someone else's dreams. It was mine. Just mine. 1 bedroom, large windows, a kitchen where I could cook for one without feeling like I was doing something wrong. Quit waiting tables. Started sleeping normal hours for the first time in 5 years. Tended my classes with the kind of focus I'd never been able to give anything when half my energy was going toward keeping Daniel's life afloat. Program was intensive, 18 months, designed for working professionals. I thrived in it. Turned out that when you're not exhausted from working 2 jobs to support someone else's ambition, you have plenty of energy for your own. My professors noticed. By the end of the first semester, I was being asked to present at conferences. By the end of the second, I'd been offered a graduate assistantship that came with a tuition waiver and a stipend. I didn't need the money anymore, but I took it anyway. Put it in savings. Started building something that belonged only to me. I heard about Daniel occasionally, through the inevitable social overlap of a 7-year relationship. His residency was difficult. He was struggling with the hours, the pressure, the reality of being a first-year resident without someone at home managing the rest of his life. Simone had stuck around for about 6 months before realizing that dating an exhausted, debt-ridden resident wasn't quite the glamorous life she'd imagined. She left him in August. His sister told me this during a chance encounter at a coffee shop. She'd apologized for taking his side during the divorce, said she understood now what I'd been dealing with. Said Daniel had been calling her at all hours, complaining about how hard everything was, how he had no support, how he'd made a terrible mistake. He asked if I thought you'd talk to him, she said carefully. I told him absolutely not. But he wanted me to tell you he's sorry. That he understands now what you did for him. What did you say? I asked. I said you'd moved on, that you're finishing your master's degree and doing really well. She paused. He didn't take it well. I sipped my coffee. That's not my problem anymore. She smiled. No, I guess it's not. I graduated with my master's degree in December, a year and a half after the divorce was finalized. My parents flew in from California for the ceremony. My friends from the program were there. My thesis advisor, who'd become a mentor and eventually a friend, gave a speech about resilience and second chances. Daniel wasn't there. Neither was anyone from his family. That chapter was closed. The reception afterward, my advisor pulled me aside. I wanted to let you know before it's officially announced, the director position at the Colorado Coalition for Youth is opening up in January. I've already submitted your name for consideration. The board wants to interview you next week. Coalition was one of the largest nonprofits in the state. The director position was the kind of role I'd dreamed about but hadn't imagined reaching for another 5 years. Are you serious? I asked. Completely. You're ready, Maya. More than ready. I got the position. Started in February. 34 years old, finally doing the work I'd postponed for someone else's dream, making twice what I'd made as a program coordinator. The office came with a window view of the mountains and the kind of autonomy I'd earned through every sacrifice I'd made and every boundary I'd finally learned to set. Daniel found out somehow. Sent me an email in March, almost 2 years after the divorce was finalized. Maya, I heard about your new position. Congratulations. You deserve it, I've been doing a lot of thinking lately about everything that happened between us. About the mistakes I made. I was selfish and blind, and I took you for granted in ways I'm only now beginning to understand, I know I have no right to ask this, but I'd like to talk. To apologize properly. To see if there's any way we could, I deleted it before finishing. Blocked his email address. Moved on with my day. A week later, I was having lunch with my old colleague Rachel, the one who'd recommended Robert Chen, when she asked the question everyone had been carefully avoiding. Are you seeing anyone? No, I said. I'm not really looking. Not looking or not ready? I thought about it. Not interested in repeating old patterns. I spent 7 years making myself smaller so someone else could feel bigger. I'm not doing that again. That's not the same as being alone forever. I know. But right now, alone feels pretty good. And it did. I had work I cared about. A home that was entirely mine. Friends who respected my boundaries. A life I'd built from the ground up after watching someone else demolish the one I'd sacrificed everything to create. I ran into Daniel one more time, purely by accident, at a medical conference the coalition was co-sponsoring in September. I was presenting on youth mental health initiatives. He was there as part of his residency program's community outreach requirement. I saw him across the lobby during registration. He looked older. Tired. He saw me too, and his face went through a series of expressions I didn't have the energy to decode. He walked over. I didn't walk away. Maya, he said. Hi. Daniel. Silence stretched between us. He looked like he wanted to say something meaningful, something that would explain or excuse or somehow make sense of what had happened. You look good, he finally said. Thank you. I heard about your promotion. Director of the coalition. That's really impressive. I worked hard for it. More silence. He shifted his weight, uncomfortable. I've been wanting to talk to you. To explain. There's nothing to explain, I said. Not unkindly. Just factually. You made your choices. I made mine. We're both living with the consequences. I made a mistake, Maya. A huge mistake. I didn't understand what I had until you lost it, I finished. I know. I got your email. You didn't respond. No, I didn't. He looked at me with something like desperation. Is there any chance, any possibility that we could talk? Really talk? I'm not asking for another chance. I know I don't deserve that. I need you to know that I understand now. What you gave up. What I threw away. I looked at this man I'd loved for 9 years, sacrificed for, nearly broken myself trying to support, and I felt nothing but a distant, detached kind of pity. I'm glad you understand, I said. But your understanding doesn't change anything. Doesn't give me back the years I lost or the opportunities one missed. It doesn't erase the humiliation of watching you bring another woman to our celebration dinner and asking me not to be jealous. I know that. I just wanted you to know that I'm sorry. Okay, I said. You're sorry. I heard you. Now, if you'll excuse me, I have a presentation to prepare for. I walked away. Didn't look back. Gave my presentation an hour later to a room full of medical professionals and community organizers. Spoke about resilience and recovery and the importance of supporting young people through trauma. Daniel was in the back row. I saw him. I didn't acknowledge him. Through the presentation, during the networking reception, he tried to approach me again. I was talking to the chief of pediatrics at Denver General about a potential partnership when he appeared at my elbow. Maya, I was hoping. I'm in the middle of a conversation, I said calmly. Please excuse me. The chief of pediatrics looked between us, sensing the tension. Daniel left. I never saw him again. 6 months later, I heard he'd finished his residency and taken a position at a hospital in Phoenix. Left Colorado entirely. Started over somewhere new, where people didn't know the story of how he'd destroyed his marriage. I hoped he'd learn something. I hoped he'd become a better person. But mostly, I just didn't think about him at all. 3 years after the divorce, I was exactly where I'd always wanted to be. Running an organization that mattered. Making a difference in ways I could measure and feel proud of. Living in a home I'd bought with my own money, decorated with things I chose, filled with silence that felt like peace instead of punishment. I'd started dating again. Nothing serious yet. But I was learning, slowly, carefully, how to recognize green flags instead of just red ones. How to walk away when something felt wrong instead of convincing myself I was being difficult. How to choose people who added to my life instead of draining it. I thought sometimes about that graduation dinner. About standing in that beautiful room I'd reserved, watching my husband walk in with another woman and ask me not to be jealous. About the way my entire world had cracked open in that moment. It was the worst night of my life. It was also the night I started getting my life back. The revenge wasn't in the divorce settlement, though the money helped. It wasn't in his struggle during residency or his breakup with Simone or even in his eventual understanding of what he'd lost. The revenge was in every morning I woke up in my own home, went to my own job, lived my own life without having to consider someone else's needs before my own. The revenge was in becoming the person I would have been if I'd never met him. The revenge was in realizing that his presence in my life had been the obstacle, not the solution, and that removing him had freed me to become everything I was always capable of being. Some people think revenge has to be loud. Dramatic. Public destruction of the person who wronged you. But the quietest revenge is simply this: building a life so fulfilling that the person who hurt you becomes irrelevant to it. My name is Maya. And I am no longer anyone's sacrifice.